The Sierra sounds are singularly important in the study of Sasquatches. The sounds represent a wide variety of very strange vocalizations that were emitted from unseen entities in the woods. It sounds like people actually speaking an unknown language.
From eerie forests in Utah to frozen Siberian nights, cameras have captured shapes and sounds that shouldn't exist. Massive dark figures, thunderous howls, footprints the size of dinner plates, each sighting more baffling than the last. Skeptics call them hoaxes, but modern analysis keeps coming up empty. Here are some of the most unbelievable Bigfoot sightings caught on camera. Could these be the clearest clues yet that Bigfoot is real? The Salt Lake City Forest Encounter. Our journey begins in the dense woodlands near Salt Lake City, Utah. At first glance, the photo in question doesn't look like much, just another shadow in a tangle of trees. But the longer you stare at it, the harder it becomes to dismiss. Nestled among thick vegetation and undergrowth is a large, dark figure. It isn't a neat shape, the kind of outline you'd expect if this was just a fallen tree or a bear. Instead, it looks hunched, its massive shoulders sloping forward, its head turned ever so slightly, as if it's aware that someone is watching. The branches half hide it, yet the bulk of the figure seems undeniable. There's a weight to it, a presence that makes the forest feel smaller, tighter, and infinitely more unsettling.
I have personally taken several Sasquatch sighting reports of them in trees or jumping down out of trees. Now, they're certainly up there for a reason, and most likely that's food. Human ancestors exploited eggs and nests for food. Why wouldn't a Sasquatch? I mean, Sasquatches are apes. They're made for climbing.
The atmosphere of the image is equally eerie. Thick shadows pool beneath the leaves, creating natural camouflage. Anyone or anything standing there would be difficult to see clearly. And that is precisely the problem with so many Bigfoot photographs. They're not taken in laboratories or on sunny afternoons with pristine lighting. They're snapped in the heat of the moment, deep in forests where every patch of shadow plays tricks on the eye. The setting alone makes you second-guess what you're looking at, and yet this very blend of darkness and foliage also makes the possibility of something hiding there feel all the more real. From an analytical perspective, this image fits squarely into what cryptid researchers call the blurry but massive category. For decades, alleged Bigfoot evidence has shared this frustrating quality, always just clear enough to pique interest, but never sharp enough to silence the skeptics. A blurred silhouette here, an oversized footprint there. This Utah photograph feels like a textbook example. Its indistinct edges make it hard to draw definitive conclusions, and that fuzziness is exactly what fuels doubt. If the subject really is Bigfoot, why does it always appear just out of focus? Yet, if it isn't Bigfoot, why does it so perfectly resemble the countless eyewitness reports we've collected for more than a century? That brings us to the human brain itself.
There are 7 documented Sasquatch sighting reports from Utah County, which is where Provo, Utah is. There are probably 700 that we've never heard about.
Experts often caution against falling victim to pareidolia, the mind's tendency to find familiar shapes in random patterns. It's why we see faces in clouds or animals in the texture of tree bark. When staring at this Salt Lake City image, our brains may be doing the same thing, sculpting a creature out of shadows, branches, and leaves. Once someone whispers Bigfoot, the mind is all too eager to connect the dots and conjure a hulking figure from the chaos of the woods. Science tells us to be cautious, to remember that sometimes our senses betray us, and yet the counterpoint is equally compelling. Unlike many alleged sightings that dissolve into nothing when you zoom in, this figure maintains a certain symmetry and consistency. The broad shoulders match decades of Bigfoot descriptions. The slightly turned head gives the impression of awareness, as though the creature is reacting to the photographer. The mass of the torso looks solid, not like a patchwork of leaves or a trick of light. Even the way the figure appears partially crouched lines up with known reports of Sasquatch postures. If these were just random branches, it would be unusual for them to fall so neatly into the outline of something so human-like and yet so distinctly non-human. The Utah Forester's Forest video. Our next story takes us from a single still image to moving footage captured in the same state. This time, it wasn't a hiker or a tourist, but a forester making his usual patrol through private woodland. His goal was simple: check the land for intruders. The day seemed ordinary enough until he spotted something in the distance. At first, His instinct was to shout, to call out and demand that the figure leave his property. But something stopped him. Perhaps it was the way the figure stood, tall and unmoving, its shape unlike any person he had seen before. Instead of confronting it, he pulled out his camera and began to record. That decision would change everything. The footage that emerged is brief but striking. The figure in the video doesn't run or stumble like a person caught trespassing. Instead, it moves with heavy, deliberate steps. Each stride seems to cover more ground than a human could manage. The arms swing low, so long they nearly reach the knees. This is not the clumsy sway of a man in a bulky costume. It is fluid, purposeful, and unnervingly powerful. The head sits low on the shoulders, giving the figure a slightly conical shape. There's no visible neck, another detail that aligns with countless eyewitness accounts of Bigfoot. It's as though the creature has been built for strength, for life in the wild, in ways no human body could truly imitate. Even more unsettling is the demeanor of the figure. It doesn't look startled or threatened. It doesn't hurry to escape, nor does it charge at the forester. Instead, it walks with calm confidence, as though it has roamed this land long before humans began to patrol it.
All of the Aborigines down there have drawings on the walls of caves depicting these things. They're prevalent in their storytelling traditions as well. But then the settlers came in the late 1700s, and they too started running into yowies, which is another very strong indicator that they're a real biological animal.
That calmness is something many witnesses have described. Bigfoot, if it exists, doesn't act like a cornered animal. It acts like a creature that knows it won't be caught. Elusive, non-confrontational, yet strangely dignified. Experts who reviewed the Utah forester's footage couldn't help but compare it to the most famous Bigfoot evidence of all time, the Patterson-Gimlin film of 1967. The similarities are striking. The stride length, the broad shoulders, the swinging arms, all nearly identical to the creature captured in that historic clip. Even the calm, steady pace mirrors what Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin recorded more than half a century ago. For believers, this consistency only strengthens the argument. Could all of these sightings, across time and geography, really be explained away as hoaxes when the physical details match so closely? Of course, the skeptics remain. They argued that the video is inconclusive, that modern costumes can mimic muscular movement better than ever before. They point to the shaky camera and the distance of the subject as flaws that make definitive identification impossible. But what they can't dismiss is the instinctive human reaction. The forester himself hesitated to shout. He felt in that moment that whatever he was seeing wasn't just another man in the woods. And when you watch the footage, you can feel it too. That creeping sense that something larger than life is moving just beyond the tree line. Umatilla Reservation night howls. Deep in the woods near the Umatilla Indigenous Reservation, a group of campers expected a peaceful evening under the stars. The first hours passed like any normal trip. A crackling fire, quiet conversation, and the rustle of night creatures beyond the tree line. But as darkness thickened, the forest began to change. What started as faint, distant laughter soon grew sharper and stranger. The sound didn't belong to coyotes or owls. It carried an almost human pitch, eerie, hollow, and mocking. The group paused, their own laughter fading as the forest seemed to lean in closer. Moments later, the laughter twisted into something deeper. Low, guttural howls began to rise from the darkness. They weren't steady like a wolf's call. They surged and retreated, sliding through octaves with a lung power that felt almost physical in the chest.
There's a retired cryptolinguist from the US Navy. He's realized that there are phonemic patterns that repeat in the sounds. Those are words. Sasquatches might be talking to one another.
What unsettled the campers most was how the sounds seemed to move. One moment, the howls came from the west, then suddenly from the east, as if something huge and unseen was circling the campsite. Flashlights darted across the trees, catching only endless trunks and branches. Nothing moved, at least nothing they could see. When experts later examined the audio, the mystery only deepened. A digital waveform of the night's recording revealed sharp spikes in low-frequency sound, the kind of bass resonance that takes an enormous chest cavity to produce. Interspersed among the howls were irregular, hollow knocks, short, percussive bursts that didn't match any known bird or mammal calls. In Bigfoot research circles, these so-called wood knocks are often interpreted as a form of communication or territorial display. The pattern that night was anything but random, almost like a coded message passed between invisible giants. For the people of the Umatilla Reservation, these woods are more than just trees and trails. Local oral traditions speak of ancient forest beings, spirits who guard the land and occasionally reveal themselves to the worthy or the unwary. Elders have told stories for generations about shadow dwellers who can mimic human voices and move silently through dense brush. To them, the strange howls and phantom laughter were not entirely surprising. They were echoes of an older world that never fully disappeared. And yet the modern mind resists easy conclusions. Could a pack of animals have produced the layered sounds? Could shifting winds have made ordinary noises seem to circle the camp? Maybe. But the campers who lived through it, and anyone who listens to the recording, can feel how different this night was. Was it an elaborate hoax, a new species of animal yet to be documented, or something even older than Bigfoot lore itself? Whatever it was, that night on the Umatilla Reservation left behind a memory and a mystery that science still struggles to name. Tom's cross-legged figure in Ohio. Several states east of the Umatilla forests, another unsettling encounter unfolded in the quiet woods of Ohio. Tom was out for a simple family walk along a wooden boardwalk that overlooked a marshy clearing. It was the kind of late-afternoon stroll that barely calls for a camera, but Tom had his phone out anyway, casually filming the landscape. Nothing about the moment felt remarkable until much later. Back at home, Tom replayed the video and felt a chill. Near the edge of a railing, barely visible in the dim light, sat a small figure. At first glance, it looked like a child sitting cross-legged, maybe resting or waiting for someone. But the more he examined the frames, the less sense it made. The figure didn't shift or fidget like a child might. Its posture was impossibly compact, almost folded in on itself. There were no adults nearby, no sounds of play or movement. The scene grew stranger the longer he watched. Curiosity turned to investigation.
This is not a dude in a suit. There's no way a person could imitate that kind of motion up in a tree. Most of those branches probably couldn't even support an adult human male's weight. It has to be an ape of some sort. I think that is a Sasquatch doing baby Sasquatch stuff up in a tree.
The next day, Tom returned to the exact spot with a tape measure. The bottom rail of the boardwalk stood about 20 inches above the ground. At 6'4", Tom tried to crouch into the same position and quickly discovered he couldn't. His knees and hips simply wouldn't allow it. Whatever or whoever had been sitting there had proportions very different from an ordinary human. Zooming in on the footage revealed more unsettling details. The figure's head seemed dome-shaped, with no visible neck and a face shaded in tan and brown hues. Patches of fur-like texture blended seamlessly with the surrounding wood and leaves. Its long arms rested lightly on the railing, as if for balance, and its torso leaned forward in a calm, deliberate pose. It gave the impression of something at ease in the forest, perfectly camouflaged and unafraid of discovery. Ohio is no stranger to Sasquatch lore. The state ranks high in documented Bigfoot reports, with thick forests and winding rivers that could hide a breeding population of an unknown primate. For enthusiasts, Tom's video fits a pattern: an unexpected sighting in a wooded setting, a figure with non-human posture and proportions, and no clear evidence of human presence nearby. Some even suggested the creature could be a juvenile Bigfoot, which would explain the smaller size and the relaxed, observing behavior. Still, the skeptical mind raises its own possibilities. Could it have been a trick of perspective, a knotted tree stump that happened to resemble a seated form when caught at just the right angle? Could an unseen person have crouched there, unnoticed in the moment? Maybe. But the combination of Tom's own height, the railing measurements, and the figure's uncanny stillness continues to puzzle even those who lean toward natural explanations. For now, the cross-legged watcher of Ohio remains an open question, a fleeting shadow on the edge of human understanding. Ohio snow trail, footprints, and fur. Only weeks later, and not far from Tom's encounter, Ohio delivered another mystery, this one written in snow. On a cold January morning, hikers set out along the floodplain trail in a region locals call the Pioneer Area. The woods were silent and blanketed in white when they noticed something that stopped them in their tracks. a series of enormous human-like footprints stretching away into the forest. Each print was astonishing in size. Using a walking stick for scale, they estimated the length at roughly 15 inches, nearly half the height of the 3-foot cane in the photo they later posted online. The stride between prints was equally impressive, longer than most humans could comfortably manage. More striking still, the impressions were bare. No boot treads, no sign of footwear, just deep, clean outlines of toes and heels pressed into the frozen ground.
This cast, look at this cast. We have the toes across the front, what looks like an instep or an arch, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have a divergent little toe right here, which I really like. That comes down. I think it's safe to say that's a very strong resemblance between the two.
Whoever, or whatever left them, had crossed this isolated path barefoot in the dead of winter. As the hikers examined the area, they discovered another odd clue, a small patch of coarse brown fur lying nearby. It didn't match the usual wildlife of Ohio. Deer hair is finer, and no local predator leaves behind clumps of fur and fresh snow without tracks of a struggle. The sample only deepened the mystery. Was it shed naturally, pulled loose in movement, or evidence of an animal unknown to science? Experts who later reviewed photos of the prints noted details consistent with primate anatomy. The toes splayed naturally, and the heel extended farther back than in a typical human footprint, suggesting a foot adapted for power and balance. Combined with the sheer size and stride, the evidence pointed toward a creature of exceptional strength and weight. While some skeptics proposed that melting snow might have exaggerated the dimensions, the crisp edges of the impressions made that unlikely. Ohio's history of Sasquatch sightings stretches back generations, from whispered campfire stories to formal reports logged with Bigfoot research organizations. Dense forests, secluded wetlands, and a climate that discourages casual hikers create perfect conditions for something large and elusive to remain hidden. These new prints, paired with the mysterious fur, add one more chapter to that ongoing record. Whether they mark the passage of an undiscovered primate or an elaborate human hoax, they serve as a physical reminder that the line between legend and reality is sometimes just a single step in the snow. Igor's Siberian night vision encounter. Thousands of miles from North America, deep in the endless coniferous forests of Siberia, a man named Igor began to hear something he could not explain. At first it was subtle, low growls that might have been mistaken for distant wolves or the groan of trees shifting in the wind. But night after night, the sounds grew bolder, longer, closer, and far more menacing. Igor was no stranger to the noises of the wilderness. He had lived alone in this remote cabin for years, comfortable with the creaks and calls of nature. Yet these growls were different. They seemed deliberate, almost conversational, as if something out there was testing his courage. On one particularly dark and silent evening, the mystery reached a breaking point. Determined to find the source, Igor grabbed his night vision camera and stepped outside. The cold air hung heavy, and each crunch of snow under his boots echoed like a drumbeat. He panned the camera slowly across the tree line, expecting maybe a bear, a stray moose, or nothing at all. Instead, his screen caught a shape that made him freeze. There, just beyond the reach of his flashlight, stood a massive dark figure. It did not move or flinch. It simply watched.
Tons of Bigfoot reports come out of this particular area. Southeastern Ohio, in the area of Salt Fork State Park, is a thick, wooded wilderness. The Appalachian Mountains are no joke, and Ohio is pushed right up against them. Anything out of Southeast Ohio should be looked at very, very closely.
Through the green haze of night vision, Igor could make out a broad silhouette and what looked like a rounded head atop an immense frame. For long, breathless moments, the two stared at one another across a wall of black trees. The figure seemed perfectly comfortable in the darkness, as though it needed no night vision to see him. Occasionally, it shifted slightly, lowering itself into a sitting position, still facing him with unnerving patience. Igor called out, his voice cracking the silence. No response, no retreat. Only stillness, like a predator waiting for its moment. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the figure turned and melted back into the forest with a grace and quiet that no human could match. There was no crash of branches, no hurried steps, just absence. To this day, Igor's footage remains a puzzle. Some viewers believe he captured an undiscovered primate or even a Bigfoot-like creature adapted to the Siberian wilderness. Others argue for a bear or a carefully staged prank. Yet the calm, calculating way the figure observed him refuses to fit neat categories. What kind of being has the strength and patience to simply watch from the darkness, revealing nothing yet communicating everything? The question lingers long after the screen goes black. West Virginia mystery howls. Across the world in the wooded hills of West Virginia, another sound-based mystery unfolded years earlier. In 2013, a man hiking before dawn began recording after hearing piercing howls rolling through the valleys. At first, the noises resembled distant animal calls, but when researchers later studied the recording, the audio told a different story. The waveform displayed sudden, towering spikes of low-frequency energy, the kind that requires tremendous lung capacity to produce. Interspersed among these thunderous calls were irregular hollow knocks, sharp percussive bursts that seemed to answer one another across the hills. These were not the steady, predictable patterns of coyotes or owls. The howls rose and fell with an almost musical modulation, their pitch bending in ways that defied known animal behavior. Cryptozoologists were quick to compare the recording to the famous Sierra Sounds, a series of alleged Bigfoot vocalizations captured in California decades earlier. The parallels were striking: deep resonant tones, abrupt amplitude jumps, and an eerie cadence that felt intentional, almost like language. Even seasoned wildlife biologists admitted that no ordinary North American animal fit the acoustic profile.
If this is produced by a single creature, there is just a remarkable acoustic diversity that this alleged species has. If they are an animal, I can't confidently point to one, especially one that's native to North America.
Could shifting winds or overlapping echoes create such an effect? Perhaps. But the raw power and strange rhythm of those calls left many convinced that something else was at work, something capable of imitating nature so perfectly that it blurred the line between the familiar and the unknown. Natural phenomenon, or a hidden primate with its own form of communication? The woods of West Virginia still hold that answer. Idaho mountain silhouette. Fast forward to 2019, and a remote mountain slope in Idaho, where two hunters snapped what may be one of the most compelling Bigfoot photographs in recent years. The image is simple, yet haunting. Against a backdrop of sunlit rock and fallen timber stands a solitary dark figure, its outline unmistakably humanoid, yet distinctly alien. Broad shoulders taper into a conical head. The torso leans forward in a semi-crouch, as if mid-stride or pausing to survey the valley below. What grabs the eye is not just shape, but texture. Even in the low-angled light, the figure reflects a subtle matte sheen, like thick, matted fur catching the sun. There are no hints of clothing or gear, no backpack straps, no boot glint, only the rough uniformity of natural hair. The steepness of the slope adds weight to the mystery. This is no casual hiking trail. Reaching that vantage would challenge even seasoned climbers. Adding to the authenticity is the photograph's own character. It bears the marks of a hurried outdoor shot, light scratches, faint film grain, and uneven exposure typical of older digital cameras or analog film. Nothing about it feels staged or digitally polished. If this were a studio fake, why make it look so raw, so imperfect? To believers, the very flaws speak of truth, as though the hunters captured a moment they barely had time to comprehend. Skeptics counter that perspective and distance can play tricks. A lone tree trunk at the right angle or a distant hiker could, in theory, mimic a giant figure. Yet the proportions, broad shoulders, long limbs, and that distinctive conical head fit squarely within decades of Sasquatch reports. Whether an elaborate hoax or a rare glimpse of something extraordinary, the Idaho mountain silhouette remains one of the most debated images in the Bigfoot archive.